everyone, welcome back to my channel Tictastic. I'm Wilamena and this is day 5 of Ticmas. So for today's video I thought I would sit down and have a little talk about therapies, like in general. So for Tourette's itself and Tourette's cousins. So yeah, let's get on to the video. So to start with, I thought I would talk about my experiences with different therapies, and I'll start with therapies for Tourette's. When I was in year 6 of primary school, so the last year of primary school when I was 10 or 11, I got a referral to Great Ormond Street Hospital in London because my paediatrician thought that I would really benefit from one of the therapies that they provide for Tourette syndrome. The reason that I had to get a referral to there specifically is they are one of the only places sort of in the UK that do it. There are a couple of others, but that is sort of the main one. So I got referral there and I ended up being able to go up for an appointment. The end decision was that in the summer I would start doing ERP, which is exposure response prevention for ticks. I think it was a 10 or 12 week intense course of it, so from just before the summer holidays till right to the end, because in year 7 I would be going to secondary school, which is quite a big transition, especially as I was going to start going to boarding school, so an even bigger transition. So obviously because I don't live in London, I did the ERP therapy once a week but from home. So I'd get a Skype call every week from the person that was doing it with me, and I'd sit down with one of my parents or both of my parents and we'd do it. And it was basically teaching me to suppress, I don't want to just say suppress my tics, but it was being able to suppress my tics for an amount of time where if I was walking up the stairs I could get to the top of the stairs, or if I was holding a glass of water I could put the glass of water down, that kind of thing. And another big part of the ERP therapy was being able to recognise the tic urge or the tic alert, which is basically whenever I have a tic, before I do the tic, there's it's this weird feeling. It's really hard to describe. Everyone's might be different, who knows, but it's really hard to describe. It's like, some people say it's like a sneeze, some people say it's like itchy, some people say it's like tingling, and until you do the tic, that uncomfortable feeling doesn't go away. So kind of like when you sneeze, you have the horrible feeling, you sneeze, and then it's gone. But obviously that doesn't mean that you aren't going to sneeze again. So that's kind of how tics work. And ERP was helping to check to see if you had the tic alert and noticing that. So you either tic before you go up the stairs, or you hold in the tic until you get to the top of the stairs. That kind of thing. So that was also a big part of it. We started off by simply timing how long I could go without ticking. So at first that was probably 5 seconds, maybe 6 seconds, and I'd write down in my notebook after she'd done the stopwatch like how long it was each time. And at the start we only did it a couple of times, and I'd have to try and do it a couple of times a week, and then I think that sort of increased. So the time I would be able to suppress for got longer and longer the more I did it, so I'd try and do it most days with one of my parents. And I had a special notebook with like all the timings in, and if I got like a certain amount over like 10 seconds, if that was the goal, then I'd get like a gold star at the bottom. At that point we hadn't fully decided what the gold stars were for. All that I knew was that they were going to be for some sort of reward. So I did that most days, and then I tried to do it more often, and the time that I could suppress got longer and longer. And even though it may not seem that long, you know, I could get up to a couple of minutes, and that was, you know, really good for me. And then we started putting into place things that made it harder. So certain triggers I had, so if I was like holding a cup of water, that would trigger me or make it harder for me to hold in my tics. So we'd start doing it, so every time I did it I'd have to hold a cup or a glass of water. Usually it wasn't full with water, because I would just end up getting very wet with water, so it was usually empty. And then we started using other triggers, and then the time that I managed to suppress for got longer and longer again. And we basically did like a full intense course of this, like all through for the 12 weeks. And by the end I could hold in my tics for probably, I think I got to around 5 minutes, which was like my main goal. And sort of halfway through the therapy we decided that each time I got one of the gold stars for like a really good session, it would be it would count to, I'm not sure if you can see behind me, but these lights here, it would count for one of them. So I'd been to a shop and I'd seen that you could get a string of lights and then pick different coloured like balls from the different baskets and make your own. So at the end of the whole therapy, I counted up how many I had, and that equaled this amount of lights, and I picked each colour, so I knew that every time I got that gold star it would be one of these. Yeah, that was sort of the way of incentivising it for me, and that was great because then at the end I got this string of lights and I put them up in my room, and I knew that I got those because I worked really hard. And then for a while, even after I'd finished having my sessions with the person that was doing the ERP with me, I still carried that on into practice. So when I was away at school in year 7, I'd still do it with a certain person, and I'd have different triggers at that time. So there was one time that at one point I had a trigger which was, I was really worried that when I was in the dining hall or the cafeteria I was going to drop my tray because I would tick and drop my tray. So whenever I'd go and have an ERP session with her, she'd bring one of the dining hall trays, but I'd have to hold that, and I did that for quite a long time actually. I even did one where whenever I sort of did sport or running, I used to hold my breath as a tick. So she'd take me to the gym once or twice a week and I'd just be walking on the treadmill, and then we'd see how long I could go without doing the tick, and then I'd tell her when I'd done it. She'd be like, okay, and then she'd stop the stopwatch and write it down. I can still use those like techniques and like being able to suppress so I can get something done and be in a safe situation now. So when I'm in the dining hall and I'm really ticky, I know that I can hold my ticks for a certain amount of time for me to walk quite quickly to put my tray down so that I don't tick and drop it. So I can still put the therapy into practice even now, which I think is really great. So I really benefited from doing the ERP. At the end of the treatment, they asked me to like make a poster and put everything on it that I'd learned, and things like, it was like a motivational poster kind of thing. So I made this great poster and I still actually have it up on my wall over there, and it's just full of all the stuff that I learned. Some of it doesn't apply to me anymore because obviously that was quite a while ago, but there are still certain bits which I still really find useful. After a lot of searching, I have managed to find one of my ERP notebooks, and this is, I think, the second one I use, because this is from when I started in year 7, so after I'd done the actual whole treatment with the person from Great Ormond Street. This was sort of the carrying on of it. What did I write? Oh, I wrote each day, was it each day? It was sort of every few days, I think. I wrote down a couple of things I did in the day and how my tics were whilst I did those things. And then I wrote down how much ERP I did, so 15 minutes or half an hour or 20 minutes, and the time. And then I wrote a few attempts. So this one I think I only did 2 attempts, but the first one I managed to suppress for 3 minutes and 55 seconds. The second one I managed to suppress for 4 minutes 14 seconds. And I got a star for doing both of them over 3 minutes and 30 seconds. That's kind of how it worked. And then the next day, again, I wrote down a couple of things I did, how my tics were. I did it for 15 minutes, I did it at the same time, and I did 3 attempts, and they were all over 3 minutes, and I got a new record. So I got 2 stars on that one, because my new record was 5 minutes and 21 seconds. Oh yeah, and the goals kept changing. So at one point, my mum had written new goals. 1 star was at least 2 over 2 minutes and 30 seconds, but I had to be doing it with either my hockey stick or imagining my hockey stick, because hockey was like a trigger. I'd always tick really badly when I was playing. So that was one of the goals. And 1 star if I got a new record, and the current record at that time was 2 minutes and 39 seconds. So each time the goals were sort of changed depending on how easy they were. Oh, I did this for quite a long time. I was still doing it in March. So March 2018, and I started before the summer in 2017. Pretty proud of that. I have to say, my handwriting was not the best. On this one, I wrote down the things I'd done, so what lessons I had and how my tics were. And then at the bottom, where usually I write down the timings of how long I did for ERP and all the like details, I put in red, didn't do the ERP because very tired and not in the right frame of mind. kind of sums it up really, because it was quite intense and quite difficult, so I did have to be in the right frame of mind, otherwise it didn't tend to go very well. Oh, I used a sparkly pen on this page. Currently that is the only therapy treatment that I've had for Tourette's, but at the minute I've had a referral for therapy which is called HRT, Habit Reversal Therapy, which I think focuses on more of like a specific tic, but hopefully I can get that soon for it's like a jaw tic at the minute, which isn't very good, and I've had it for quite a long time, and it's sort of done something like to my jaw. I can't remember what it's called, but it sort of put the muscle out of place. So sometimes whenever I like eat, or sometimes when I talk, when I open my mouth or my jaw, it like makes this popping noise, and it's it's not very nice, and it's quite sore. Currently got a referral to a hospital called the Wilamena Hospital, which do HRT therapy. So hopefully, fingers crossed, they'll like accept my referral. Who knows, I might not be able to. It's just, I'd be very lucky if I could, because there aren't many places to do it. Now the next thing I want to touch on about therapies is the therapy that I had for my OCD, because I did CBT, which is cognitive behavioural therapy, but I had it for my OCD that was really bad at the time. I can't explain how much like that helped me. Like, my OCD was really bad at the time. I worked really hard at it, and it was really hard, but it was so worth it for the outcome. Like, now my OCD has got so much better. Like, on a day-to-day basis, it hardly ever like affects my daily life, which is incredible compared to how it was. So I did the CBT with my therapist at the time, from CAMS, and I'd have a Skype call with her once a week, because again, I was at boarding school and she was back near my home, so eventually I had to do it over Skype, because going back every week was quite difficult, because I did do that for a while. For the first like couple of months, I'd go home every Monday to do it, which was a lot of driving for my parents and a lot of sitting in the car for me. So eventually we managed to do it over Skype every week, which actually was a lot better. The concept of CBT for my OCD was basically trying to make me realise that some of the intrusive thoughts were just that, intrusive thoughts, and nothing would happen if I didn't turn off that plug switch. How we did this was, I did it as much as possible from home, where I'd do something which would usually trigger me and I had to leave it. So someone would turn on the plug switch in the room and I wasn't allowed to turn it off, and I'd try and sit there and not switch it off. And obviously that was really hard, because my brain was just telling me, if you don't do that, something's bad's going to happen, or if you don't do that, someone you know is going to get hurt, or whatever. So I'd have to sit there and I'd time how long I could go without turning that off, which is actually similar to the ELP that I did for my tics. Another one of my OCD things was I couldn't lend out pens from my pencil case. So what I'd do was I'd play a game of hangman or noughts and crosses, and I'd give one of my pens to the other person that was playing. I did lots of it at school with either my best friend, my house parent, or my sixth form mentor. So we'd play a game of hangman, which tried to help with that specific thing. So another one, I had a big thing around sharing in general, so other people using my stuff, so like phone chargers or hairbrushes or anything really. I'd really struggle with letting someone else have it or use it. So we have a ping pong table at school, and I had my own ping pong bats, and so for a couple of times a week for my CBT, I'd play a game of ping pong with someone, but I'd give them one of my bats. And eventually, you know, it got easier and easier to do it. It got a lot easier to fight with my brain, because my brain was telling me something bad's gonna happen. You need to do that. You need to do this, and I was going, no, I don't. I don't need to do that, nothing's gonna happen. So it's kind of like this conflict in your head, which is very loud at first, but the more you get used to it, it gets quieter. Another big part of my OCD was one year my parents got me a new watch for Christmas, because my old one was sort of like breaking and it was getting really old. So they got me a new one, but they got me the exact same one because they knew that I really liked my old one and I didn't really want a new one. And so I unwrapped it and I was like, oh yeah, and I put it on to try it on, and I hadn't taken off my old one yet. And then my dad was like, oh, you're gonna take off the old one? And I was like, oh yeah, I will in a minute. From then I couldn't then take off that old watch, because my OCD said, if you take that off, something bad's gonna happen. So I wore those two watches for a very long time. I always had those two watches on, and it was one of the big things on my OCD. So there are things like turning off a plug switch, which was hard, but it wasn't as bad as if I were to like take off one of these watches. It was a huge deal for me, like it was a huge thing. And one day in one of my last appointments with my therapist doing the CBT, and earlier on in the session she was saying, oh, how do you feel if you took off one of your watches now? And I was like, oh, I don't know yet, I don't think I'm ready yet. And then a bit later on, when we were talking about something different, I just took off the watch and I like threw it to my dad. I didn't throw it at him, I just threw it to him. He was like, oh, I've got a watch, and I wasn't wearing the other one. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've taken it off, you know, this is amazing. But my brain was still going, you've taken it off, something bad's gonna happen. So for the first like week, it was quite a lot of, I could just put it back on, oh, I could just put it back on. And from then on, after I'd taken that watch off, if I still had little OCD intrusive thoughts, I was like, yeah, but I took my watch off and nothing happened. It was this like reassurance of knowing that nothing bad happened when I did that, so it won't nothing bad would happen if I did this. And that's how I guess I sort of cracked my OCD. Obviously it's still there sometimes now, it hasn't completely gone away, because CBT isn't like a magic wand that just takes it away. And it is a lot of hard work, but it is so worth it. Or for me it was anyway, it worked so well. Throughout the journey of doing it though, there were some setbacks, so it wasn't just a clear run the whole way through. I did have a couple of setbacks. So sometimes there was the odd coincidence when I didn't turn off a plug switch and something had happened and I'd linked the two, because in my brain, because I hadn't turned that plug switch off, it controlled the rest of the world, which doesn't make much sense looking back on it, but at that time it was the most real it could have been. Like, it felt so real. So if you're someone that struggles with Tourette's and is looking for something to help them with their tics, or if you've gone down the medication route and nothing has really helped, or you've gone down the medication route and it is helping but you still need something else, I would highly recommend therapy. But it can be a long process, waiting lists and referrals and all of this, but it is very unlikely that you'll like regret doing it. So I just say go for it. And if you're someone that doesn't have Tourette's but has a cousin of Tourette's, like OCD or ADHD or whatever, and there are therapies available, again, just go for it. If you're in need of some sort of coping mechanism or some way to control it better, then I couldn't recommend it more. So I hope this video was helpful in some way and gave you a bit of insight about the world of therapies for not only Tourette's but things like OCD and my experience with it. And I hope you enjoyed watching. Thank you for watching, and come back tomorrow to see day 6 of Ticmas. Yeah, smash that like button if you liked it, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye!